Who are the top 10 strongest characters in the Hazbin Hotel universe? Now recently, if y'all have been keeping up with my channel, you would have seen me ranking things like the overlords and talking about why I think so many of them are strong. But what about the other characters? Characters like Mammon, Asmodeus, Lucifer, the 7 deadly sins, or even characters like Adam and the Seraphim. Where do they stack up? Who are the top 10 strongest in the series? So today in this special video, I'll be devoting the time to rank the top 10 strongest characters from the series Hazbin Hotel and helluvaboss. Now quickly, first things first, I will be devoting time to explain to you a few honorable mentions, the characters that you would think are on the list, and me basically explaining why they're not as strong as the other characters. Now of course, number 12 on this list and the first honorable mention is none other than Stallis. Everyone remembers Stallis from helluvaboss. He's really powerful and most would think he should be higher. But there are sadly a few issues with his scaling, one of the biggest ones being the fact that he has no counter to things like angelic metal. We saw this within the striker fight. When he came up against someone as weak as striker with angelic metal, he couldn't even escape striker properly, and striker's nowhere near even the top 15 or top 20 of this list. Now in fairness to the other side, there are a few things that back up Stallis' power. A good example is in the pilot when explaining Alice's power, there seems to be a narrative comparison between Ask Oasia and other overlords. And if anything, Stallis should probably be on the stronger end of Ask Oasia, judging by the Ask Oasia we made in the series. And as much as I do hate the whole Vivzy Pop statement involving Alastor versus Stallis, and I hate how it's taken out of context, I do agree that the fact that Vivzy had to even think about it implies that Stallis is at least as strong as other overlords. But now with that one out of the way, who is the next honorable mention? That's none other than Paimon, Stolas' father. See, for me personally, I find Paimon to be one of the most difficult characters to rank in the Hazbin Hotel universe. He has no real feats, no real statements. All we can rely on is the fact that he seems to be the king of the Ask Oasia. And on top of being the king with 20 plus children, it also seems to be shown in Stallis' backstory that Paimon's actually the one who hands out their books. Which, as we know from Stallis himself, the books are the source of harnessing Ask Oasia power. But yeah, that's realistically all I have for Paimon, since there's not much to talk about since he's had one episode appearance in the series. But wait a minute, if Stallis and Paimon are honorable mentions, who's number 10? For me, the 10th strongest in the Hazbin Hotel universe is none other than Carmilla Carmine. For me personally, Carmilla Carmine's one advantage over the two Ask Oasia is the fact of angelic weaponry. We've just seen Carmilla's weaponry used by characters like Striker against Stolas, and Stolas couldn't do anything to escape it. And the reason this is so insane is because Striker is just a hybrid imp. He's not that powerful on his own. We've seen him fight Millie, we've seen him fight Moxie, we've seen him fight Blitz. He's not necessarily that much stronger than them. Now what happens when we put Stolas against the same type of weaponry in the hands of the person who made them, who is an overlord far stronger and far more skilled with way more experience? I feel like when I say it like that, it's pretty obvious that Stolas would lose to Carmilla Carmine. And realistically, since Paimon has none of the extra feats we could say to give him an advantage, I don't see a way Paimon would win either. Which means for me personally, I don't see a good way Carmilla Carmine can't be number 10 on this list. And with all of this explained, this seems to be a perfect segue to go to number 9, which is Alastor. Now I've made two reasonably popular videos explaining why Alastor defeats the likes of Stolas and Alastor defeats the likes of Carmilla, but I'll summarize them pretty simply. So for those who may have forgotten, within the backstory of Alastor within the Hazbin Hotel pilot, is explained to us that Alastor has harnessed the most power out of any sinner. Of course, Carmilla is a sinner too. On top of this, we know for a fact that Alastor has a counter for angelic metal. We see his force field is able to stop the attacks of the angelic weapon, meaning Alastor quite obviously has a counter and the scaling to put him above the likes of Carmilla. Now I can think of the comments already. Well, Vivzy said that Stolas defeats Alastor. Let's look at the context of that statement for a second. Vivzy says multiple times that she actually doesn't know who would win the fight, and even the surrounding people who are listening who work on the show disagree with her when she says she thinks Stallis might win. And even after the fact, when she finally gives an answer, she still says she doesn't know. So realistically, all the stuff in verse points towards Alastor. I don't want to take a Vivzy statement that she's not even sure of from over 3 years ago. And with all this kind of concludes my Alastor scaling as a whole, and bringing me onto the 8th spot being Asmodeus. Now as a whole, I feel like the 7 deadly sins are some of the weirdest characters to scale in the verse, because they don't have a lot of concrete stuff apart from narrative. But the few things we do know seems to imply a lot. For example, we know the 7 deadly sins seem to draw power from the sin itself, which grants them a type of power from the sin itself that doesn't require things like soul dealing, which is how sinners become overlords, which from a greater story aspect would imply to us that sins are probably stronger than the sinners themselves. And if we even take a second to look at the conversation between Stolas and Asmodeus, it seems to imply to us, judging by Asmodeus' powers, that he's a more powerful magic user than even Stolas, which is a pretty insane idea if you think about it, especially when you consider the fact that Asmodeus is stated by Moxie's dad to be the weakest sin, which works as a good segue into the 7th spot being Mammon. Now if we take a second to think about it, the way that Moxie's dad puts it, it seems to be an obvious and well-known thing that Asmodeus is the weakest sin, which is also why I find the confrontation between Mammon and Asmodeus to be such a big anti-feat for Mammon. Like seriously, take a second to think about it. You have the weakest of the group and he's able to press you that badly. Yeah, Mammon has a huge anti-feat, which is why he's probably the second weakest sin, which means in turn, out of the 4 sins that we've been introduced to in the series so far, Mammon has to be the second weakest, meaning meaning that number 6 has to be Beelzebub. So this one's going to be relatively simple. Alright, take a second to think about it. Beelzebub and Mammon have relatively the same scaling. They're both over Asmodeus, but one has a huge anti-fear and the other doesn't. Now I should make this abundantly clear. This is going to be the second last sin we see on the list because the others haven't been introduced yet. I don't know where they scale, I don't know what they do. They should be above Asmodeus, but that's it. And since they're not in the series yet, I won't rank them. So now on to number 5. Number 5 on the list for me has to be Adam. So there's a few good things going for Adam. One of the biggest ones being the fact that he's so more physically powerful than the likes of Alastor, who is super powerful. And on top of all that, due to the fact that he's an angel, we don't know if the sins actually have a way to take him down. Unlike the other people like Lucifer, who we've seen be able to take him down, we don't know if the sins can. On top of this fact, he seems to possess angelic metal just like the rest of them, meaning he might have a way to take down the sins even if he isn't as powerful as them. And since he's far more physically capable than the likes of Carmilla, I think he'd do better with them in terms of actual striking. So no matter what way you cut it, I can't imagine a good way that Asmodeus, Mammon, or Beelzebub will be able to take him down. Which brings me to number 4 on the list, being Lilith. Lilith has a pretty good narrative if you think about it. Because Lucifer was so depressed and staying out of things, Lilith was the one who rose to power and defined power in hell. And as the backstory so graciously implies, Lilith is the one who rose in power as the de facto ruler of hell. Therefore, she would probably have to be above the sins, or at least some type of faction. Now you could be asking, well, how does she take down Adam? Well, that actually could be very simple. As we see from Lucifer, if you are that disastrously strong, it is very possible to take down Adam. On top of this fact, Lilith is in heaven as we speak. She probably does have access to angelic weapons. It would only make sense, and she might actually just be an angel within itself. So yeah, as much as this one isn't as concrete because it's more of a narrative argument, I feel like the narrative does heavily poise the fact that Lilith is one of the strongest characters in the series. Which brings us to number 3 on the list. Who could be number 3? Well, for me, number 3 is none other than Sarah the Seraphim. So first things first, when we see Sarah, she is one of the original angels helping sculpt heaven. We see it in the backstory. We even see her involved within the sculpting of Earth itself. We see it in the backstory. She was around back then and is seemingly a powerful force who leads heaven at this point. On top of this, her rank and everything surrounding her character and her interactions with Adam imply to us that Adam is probably weaker than her. And as the ruler of heaven, it wouldn't surprise me if she also has the edge over Lilith. They are both pretty narratively driven characters, and I feel like Sarah's narrative is just far higher than Lilith. But then if I'm saying all these things, it must be pretty obvious who I have above Sarah, as much as some might disagree. The next person on this list is none other than Lucifer. First things first, I feel like it's pretty obvious. Lucifer is a seraphim just like Sarah. He has the wings, he has the narrative, everything seems to imply it. But I feel like one of the major things that separate Lucifer and every other angel we've seen is his fighting ability. He's quite clearly a far better fighter than the likes of Adam, something we don't know is the case for Sarah. And on top of this, there's a very good possibility Lucifer's just gone stronger since he's came to hell. As we've seen, his powers have adapted to a more hellish form. This is why his powers go from the colourful powers that we saw originally to things like the devil's horns and the fire usage, etc. Which could easily imply a growth in power, which kind of tells me that yes, this is the case. So yeah, number 2 is out of the way. Let's get into the final spot. I'd like to first thank everyone who subscribed to my Patreon. I'm very thankful to everyone that got involved. I hope you do check it out in the description below, as I'm trying to get more people to make more extra exclusive content for everyone. And for the number 1 spot, I feel like it's very obvious. It's obviously Moxie. No, I'm joking. Of course, number 1 is God. Now, I can already think of it. People are trying to say one of two comments. Either God doesn't exist within Hazbin Hotel, or we haven't seen him. Yes, I am breaking my own rule. We haven't seen him in the series, but we do know he exists. I feel like there's 2 major reasons we know he exists. One of the biggest ones being that the hell and heaven system wasn't created by the angels from what we can see, judging by how Sarah doesn't understand it. And on top of this fact, there's an even more undeniable one. The cherubs just confirm it. In the helluvaboss episode with the cherubs, they literally say, do not take the Lord's name in vain when they say, oh my God. Now you could argue, well, that's for comedic effect, but the thing is that the cherubs are serious. They are completely serious when they say this, meaning nothing really contradicts it, so therefore, God exists in the universe and will most likely be the strongest. Now you might ask, why am I including this cheap pick? It's because last time I said Lucifer's the strongest, everyone was commenting, well, God exists, so I just mentioned it so people would leave me alone. I hope everyone has a great video. I hope you all enjoyed this. Leave a comment if you disagree or you agree. Tell me what you think, and let me know what type of videos you would like to see me drop, as I'm planning way more content and I'm going to do even more series. See you guys.